How many times have you heard, take care of your equipment and it will take care of you? Well, today we're going to be doing a 50-hour service on the Summit TX25H, and it's hard for us to believe that we've already got 50 hours on this machine, but we do, and it's ready for service. The first thing I'm going to do is make this tractor safe to work on. So I have these safety stops for a front end loader, and they're made by Rose Metal Products, and they fit right here over top of your cylinder. And they have this pin that holds them in place, and I've already put the one on the other side. And now I let my loader down, and the loader is safely in the up position. Now you may be asking, why do I want the loader in the up position? It'll just make it easier to service. And although this is a removable loader, if you remove this loader, it doesn't really give you better access to the filters. This is the access that you get with the loader up. And if I had removed this loader, it would remove from this point right here. I'd still have this bracket, and the oil filter is back behind this bracket, and the fuel filter is right here. There's a hydraulic filter on this side right underneath this bracket. The drain plugs are on either side of the oil pan. It's a split oil pan with the drive shaft going through the center. And we'll go over to the other side of the tractor and show you what's over there. On the left side of the tractor, underneath your left foot, is another hydraulic filter. Up underneath here is a hydraulic filter that you clean and put back. You don't actually replace that one. And then there's 3 hydraulic drain plugs in the back. And when I say the back, I mean the bottom of the axle. More towards the front are the 3 drain plugs. And this right here is where you add your hydraulic fluid for your transmission and your loader. Rather than me trying to memorize everything, I will put the fluid capacities on the screen. But I went to Tractor Supply and I got the right oil for the tractor. I got the transmission fluid. I got a filter kit from Summit. Got filter wrenches to take off the filters, drain pans to catch the oil. And that's it. I think that's all I need to get this service done. If I use any special tools or there's something that's difficult, I'll be sure to video that and help you guys out when you're servicing your Summit. I didn't have the right size metric wrenches for these plugs, so I'm going to be using an adjustable wrench. I'll just be careful I don't round off the edges when I pull the plug out. The oil drain plug is 22 millimeters. Just going to buzz this off with this impact wrench. And there it goes. We'll do the same thing over here on this side. I put the plug on the other side after it drained, but I'll go back now that that plug has been in there a while and get that last bit of oil out of the other side. I mentioned earlier it's a split oil tank, so you got to take out 2 plugs to drain all the oil. And I also have the dipstick out so that air can come in from the top so that it flows out, so the used oil flows out easily. And when you're taking these plugs out, you got to be careful because there's it's either a brass or some other type of seal ring that's up against the crankcase. I don't think it came off with this one. I think it stayed on the oil pan on that one. But it looks like this side has less oil than the other side. Looks like it's a smaller cavity. Here's a view from underneath you might find helpful. You can see here's one side of the oil pan and there's the other side over there. This one's about done draining. I'm going to put the plug in this one and then go get a little bit more drain oil out of the other one and then pull the oil filter. Next, we're going to take off the oil filter, and it's back behind this fuel filter. It's really hard to see, and it's mounted to the block sideways. You might be able to see it better, but here is your inline fuel filter, and back behind here, this round thing is your oil filter. We'll see if we can get my filter wrench in here. In order to give myself a little bit more room to work on that oil filter, I'm going to do the fuel filter next. And this tractor doesn't have a fuel shutoff coming from the fuel tank. So I'm going to take a pair of vice grips, little vice grips, with a piece of cardboard in the jaw, and clamp off the line coming to the top of the filter, just so there'll be a little bit less mess. I'm going to fill the new fuel filter with fuel, just so it minimizes the chance that we vapor lock, and we shouldn't have to bleed too much, if at all, if we get this filter pretty full. Quickest way to have a diesel stop running is get air in the fuel line. if that fuel free flows out of there, if that clamping trick didn't work, then we're probably gonna not be able to have this off while we work on the oil filter. We'll see what happens. So far, it's not flowing out. Got the drip pan right under it. Oh, there's a lot of threads. So we must have turned that flow off pretty good because that's not dripping out bad at all. That fuel filter off, we have a little bit more room. This ground strap's in the way. And don't really have an easy way to move that. So I'm just gonna try and get my filter wrench in there. How many of you that have done your own oil changes have had to stick a screwdriver or something inside of your oil filter to get it off? I was able to get it loose, but I had to use a big set of channel lock pliers, or water pump pliers as we used to call them when I was a child. But I got the filter loose. There's going to be quite a bit of oil drainage back here on this frame of this tractor. I'm going to try and mop it up with that rag right there. Yeah, there's quite a bit of oil dripping down, but it's off. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being that you had to stick a screwdriver through the filter to get it out, I would rate this removal of this filter to be a 7 or so. I had to take off the grounding strap that was there, that was in the way, and take off the fuel filter to get to it. And then I couldn't get my filter wrench in there no matter what I did. And this is collapsible. This thing allows you to get into tight spaces. I couldn't get that in there. Luckily, I had a big pair of these pliers, and if I didn't have these, I don't know how I would have got that filter off. It's just, there's no access to it, and luckily it wasn't tight. A lot of times with new tractors, this is the first time this filter's been changed, they will paint the tractor with the filter on it, and you'll get a film of paint, and it's really hard to break that paint. You wouldn't think so, but there's been many filters that have had to come off in pieces because of the manufacturer's paint. But I got it off. I'm going to get it in. I can't pre-fill it because the oil filter will sit sideways. I'm going to put it in dry. It doesn't change the capacity or anything. You still got to put the same amount of oil in the engine, but what I like to do is have a little bit of oil, or at least as full as I can, in the filter so that there's no cavitation of the oil pressure system on startup. Some people say that doesn't matter. I figure it can't hurt any, but in this case you can't do anything. So I can get the filter on. It's threaded. It's got a lot of threads, and as soon as it contacts the gasket, which it did, I'll give it another full turn or so with nice dry hands so I make sure I get it tight. And then I'm going to spray a bunch of degreaser in there, because what you don't want to do is think you have an oil leak later, but it's just oil leaking off your frame. And I want to get that frame as clean as possible, so in case there is any oil residue there, I'll know it's an actual leak and not something as a result of this maintenance. Got the grounding strap back on, and now it's time to put on the fuel filter. I've got the fuel filter full of fuel, and I also have fuel on the gasket to help lubricate the gasket. You don't want to cross thread it. Make sure it's started correctly. It's going to take a lot of turns to get it on there. Once it's up, once I get that gasket up against the base, I'll give it another turn or so with dry hands. And then the fuel filter and the oil filter will be done, and we'll put oil back in the engine. I'm going to spray this purple power in here. Just spray it liberally, and then come in underneath and wipe it all down. Just get all that oil residue off there. And it's a good thing I did too, because that actually drips down into the drain pan, and it looked like the drain plug was leaking, but it wasn't. It was oil from this filter. Get all this as clean as possible. We're ready to put in the oil, and the oil filler is on the top of the Mitsubishi 3-cylinder diesel engine. Easy to get to, and the specs call for 1.11 US gallons. So I've got 1 gallon of oil here. I'm just going to put basically all of it in there and then check the level. It's probably going to be slightly over serviced until we start it up and get oil in that oil filter and throughout all the passages throughout the engine. Without the rose metal product safety stops on the loader, I wouldn't feel confident to do this up under here, and I would actually have to come over top of the loader arms. But with those stops in place, I know this loader can't fall, and I can get easy access in here to pour this oil in. Summit does a great job putting all of their manuals online. I don't think any other tractor manufacturer does it, or at least they don't do it for free. But you don't even have to own a Summit tractor. You can just go to summittractors.com and you can see all their manuals online. And use that manual, not some YouTuber, to maintain your tractor. Because that's the definitive guide to maintenance on this tractor. Not Brad from Piney Grove. I'm just showing you where the plugs are and how I am changing the fluids, but I'm not going to go over every single thing in the 50-hour checklist. I checked the oil. It's full on the dipstick. So unless we have a fuel airlock, we should start right up. Let me make sure there's nothing leaking underneath. Looks good. Now that the tractor's been run after the oil change, I'll check that oil level after it's had a minute to sit. But for now, I'm gonna switch to draining the hydraulic oil. It's too hard to get the camera under here while I'm working, but where I put that 24mm socket, that's one of your drain plugs. And back there by the mid-mount PTO shaft, I'll try and get my finger in frame, there's a plug right there, and there's a plug on the opposite side of that. Those are the plugs. I also see another plug on the bottom of that mid-mount shaft. There might be 3 there and this one here that I have the socket on. So it looks like I'm going to pull 4 plugs and not 3. And if one of them is not a drain plug, it's no big deal. If it's just a bolt, then I'll just put it back in. So I've been draining for a while, and I'm going to go on record and say that changing hydraulic fluid on a tractor is just not a fun job. And it's not overly difficult. We just went through the oil change, the engine oil change, and that filter was a little hard to get to. But the sheer volume of the hydraulic oil that's in a tractor, and I'm just not set up for that. I don't have a lift. I don't have high capacity drain pans. So whenever I drain 6 gallons of hydraulic oil, I've got to do it about 1.5 gallons at a time. And I might have to store it in a bucket till I empty out the new hydraulic oil container so I have somewhere to put the waste oil. But that first plug is completely drained. I'm going to go to the back and do those other 3 plugs, and then when I pull the filters, there'll be some oil with them as well. The total capacity of the hydraulic system is 6.8 gallons. I know it's more than 6 gallons. I'll put the information on the screen, so I know I got a little bit more oil to drain. I can confirm there's 4 hydraulic drain plugs on a Summit tractor. And this is also the same for a Solis tractor, because Summit and Solis are both made by a tractor company called ITL. So there's 4 drain plugs. The one by the mid-mount mower really only had a cup or so of oil in it, but every one of the drain plugs is a magnetic drain plug. So if there's any wear metals inside of the transmission, that's supposed to capture them. And every one of them had a little bit of wear metal on them. And that's normal, because when a tractor or any sort of piece of machinery is first built, there are some machining leftovers that are inside. And I've actually done the first service on a Kubota, where I got literally a handful of metal shavings, but they were on the suction side of the filter, so they didn't go through the hydraulic system. But that's why your first oil change is usually pretty soon after you get your tractor, to get those wear metals out of the oil. So wish me luck on this hydraulic filter. I think my wrench is big enough for it. This one is easy to get to, and it came off very easily. And there's not a lot of things for it to drip on when it comes off. There's always going to be some oil, not only in the filter, but in the filter head. Normally the drain plugs are down low, so you wouldn't get any extra oil out here on this one anyway. But I just like to drain the full oil system before I take off the filters. Like I said, this one was easy. Probably the easiest one of this whole video. It's getting near the end of the day, and I'm ready for this job to be over. Ready to get back to tractoring. So you have 2 hydraulic filters in the Summit kit, and you can see that there are different sizes. So when I look at this one, it says it's part number ending in 4AE or 282. And when I look at this one, 4AE, and the other part number is worn off, but it's the same filter. Filters are pretty simple. Oil goes in the center and comes out the side, or oil goes in the side and comes to the center. Use a little bit of oil on the seal and put it up there. And I'm not going to preload these at all. This is for the hydraulic system, and when you start the tractor, it'll pressurize that system, and it doesn't need oil. If you're not moving, you're not going to harm anything. If you were to get on the tractor and step on that hydrostatic pedal and try to go forward without waiting for the hydraulic system to pressurize, that might be an issue. When you have big filters like this, you want to make sure that you get that thread, the first couple threads, perfect. You should spin on easy, and if it doesn't, just back it off and try again. You never should have to force a filter. The threads on the filter are going to be really easy to cross. You don't want to cross them. There it goes. Once it goes, you know it. It just spins on quick. We'll get it up tight against the seal, and then we'll go 1 turn or 3/4 of a turn, and that filter will be on. Let's go to the other side and do that filter, and then we'll come back and clean this strainer. It says the first cleaning on the strainer after 50 hours, and then clean after each and every 250 hours. Replace the suction strainer after 750 hours. And that's the one up underneath, and that requires a screwdriver to take it off. Let's go do the easy filter first and then come back to this one. We're on the right side of the tractor. This filter here, bigger than the other side, and it's just as easy to get to. Spinning right off. This is a vertical filter, so it's going to be full of oil. And I'll say the oil's been pretty clean. It doesn't smell like it's had any burning to it. And this 50-hour oil change is actually a big precautionary measure. It's to get those wear metals out from when an engine and a transmission and everything have first been machined, because this oil itself is not degraded to the point that it needs to be changed. But if you want your warranty to be valid and covered, then you're going to follow what your tractor manufacturer says. And Summit says they want all these fluids and all these filters changed at 50 hours. Now, a best practice on all these filters would be to write the hours on it that you did this service, but all of the filters are black except this one, and I don't have a white marker, so I just know that I did it at the 50-hour mark. Both hydraulic filters changed. Let's go clean out that strainer. For the strainer, you have a hose clamp on that end, so I'm going to loosen up that hose clamp. Then this will pull apart and that strainer will come out of there, and we'll take a look at it. Since replacing this strainer is probably going to be new to most people, it's pretty tight quarters under here, but I'm going to try and capture it for you guys. I'm using an 8mm socket instead of a screwdriver on these hose clamps. It just stays on there better. I think it just comes apart and then that strainer just pops out of there. Never had a hydrostatic tractor that's had a strainer like this on it. This will be new for me. In case you have a Summit and you want to know how this comes off, but I took this clamp off and this clamp off, and I pushed that rubber back onto this pipe, and that gave me clearance to let this come down, and I believe that just pulls right out. There's quite a bit of oil in it too. That's a low part of the tractor where that oil is trapped. I think that just comes right out. Okay, I got it dropped, and I'll show you how it came out. Once I got this side out here, this side was sitting in this rubber sleeve. I had this clamp loosened, and I just pulled it down and pulled it out, and I'll show you how to take it apart now. This is a strainer, not a filter, so you don't replace this, you just clean it. So you pull out this snap ring right here, and then you pull the strainer out and just kind of look at it. Make sure it's clean. So there's the strainer. We'll wipe that down. I don't see anything on that. Look in there, you'll see some residue in there. We'll just clean that out. This side, there's nothing to it. Shove a rag in there and swirl it around with a screwdriver. I'll show you what comes out on it. At the bottom, I don't really see anything coming out. Looks pretty clean to me. If any of you are hydraulic mechanics or, I don't know, diesel mechanics, leave a comment down below. What's the purpose of this strainer? Because it was perfectly clean. I didn't get any wear metals out of it. I don't know why this is in the system when it has 2 filters. The instructions say to change it or to clean it, so we did. And it also says to change it after 750 hours. I just don't see what it does. That doesn't mean that it isn't important and essential and will make the tractor last longer. It just means that I don't know what it does, and I'd like to know. Got the snap ring back in there. The oil flow points to the front of the tractor, so when you put that back in, it's easy to tell, and that's what it says on it as far as the cleaning interval and the change interval. I'm gonna put this back in, tighten those clamps up, and then we're ready to put in fresh transmission oil and end this job. The next step is to put in 6.6 US gallons of transmission or hydraulic oil into the tractor. The specifications are on the Summit website, but I'm not gonna make you guys watch me pour in 6.6 gallons of hydraulic fluid into this tractor. So that's gonna wrap up today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll throw up a couple links here to some of our other videos, but until next time, y'all take care out there, and remember, life's short, tractor hard.